A couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak to Conspiracy Catz. Catz is a YouTuber and educator, most well known for his work debunking the flat Earth theory. Now, he's also managed to achieve what many people find impossible, and that's actually convincing people to change their minds. And he's managed to deconvert people back to the globe Earth model. I thought it was a really interesting conversation, so I wanted to share it. There's a few technical difficulties in the middle, but hopefully it doesn't cause too much of a problem if you're watching this. Now, I started the interview by asking Catz what was the most crazy conspiracy theory he came across during his time on YouTube. Enjoy.
Oh, the weirdest one. I mean, Peter and Pete have got to be the two that come up with. It just seems every single week they try and top themselves with a weirder conspiracy. So, I mean, are clouds made of salt was one. Photosynthesis isn't real is another one they've said. I could go on and on with those two. But they did a whole series of videos on water not being made of hydrogen and oxygen, and for some reason it was being covered up that water was some kind of mystical element. And that one actually got traction on other channels and people started believing it, which I just found just bizarre. Like, it wasn't a sinister conspiracy, not like the misinformation about COVID or anything like that. It was just truly bizarre. So probably that one sticks in my mind.
Do you know where it comes from with those guys? Like, it's it just they're bored. They've got too much time on their hand.
I think so. Yeah, I think they've done so many different things that contradict each other as well. I just wonder at this point if they even know themselves. So, for example, they said oxygen doesn't exist in one video, but then in another video they said you can make oxygen with a bicycle pump. So, like, genuinely things have said. So I don't know whether they're trolling themselves or not. I don't know.
Yeah. So that was one of your first videos. Am I right? You've been on YouTube for around 2 years now.
Yeah, they were the first ones that I started with. Yeah. It was a long time before I did anything to do with flat Earth, and it was generally them and their crazy ideas.
Yeah. So what got you into flat Earth going on from there?
Well, I see. This is a story. I'll be as quick as I can with your book.
Oh no, take your time.
Well, when I was teaching full time, I had a particular class of kids that were. You know what it's like in a school. You have in a comprehensive, you have a whole spectrum of kids, don't you? You always have that set where you've got the kids with the poor attendance, the disaffected kids, the ones with the bad behaviour, etc., that tend to be in those sort of like lower sets together. And they didn't really have any interest in science. But after one lesson, one of the kids come up to me and they'd seen a video of a flat earther on YouTube, and they just thought it was hilarious. You know, they were laughing at it and they were like, "What do you think of this, sir?" And they were asking me about it, and I thought, like, maybe that was a way I could get them a bit more engaged in science. Maybe if I did an interview with a flat earther and then we showed that interview in the lesson, we could talk about all the scientific reasons why they're wrong, and it might spark a bit of an interest. So that's what I did, and it was before anything to do with the Conspiracy Catz channel. It was completely private, and it was with Sleepy Warrior. I don't know if you know him. He's one of the...
I know the name, yeah.
Well, we had an interview, and it was quite dishonest. It was my first introduction to how dishonest that community could be, because I told them exactly what I was trying to do, to have an interview with someone to talk about science with the kids. And I said, what I'm not going to do is debate you or argue with you. I will present a point to you. You can respond in whatever way you want. And even if I think you're wrong, I'm not going to say anything, because we leave that for the kids in the classroom. I will say not a single thing. I'm not going to debate you. I'm not going to try and beat you or anything like that. I will just present something to you and then let you answer it. And I even told him beforehand, exactly by email, what I was going to say to him, so he could prepare exactly what he wanted to say in return. And he knew that I wouldn't answer, because it was a classroom exercise. Anyway, he recorded it and gave it to a big YouTube channel called Celebrate Truth. I think it had 40,000 subscribers at the time. And he titled it as "Science Teacher Smashed in Debate Against Flat Earther." So dishonest. So after that, I thought, I'm not having that. So I set up the Conspiracy Conspiracy Catz channel, and all the while I was thinking, well, okay, eventually I'm going to get to flat Earth, and I did. And and I've put him straight on that. But that's why I went that route.
I was going to say you get your revenge eventually.
Oh, yeah, it turned out well. It worked out well for me, yeah, in the end. But
Yeah.
it was such a dishonest thing to do. It really was.
So a bit of an aside then, like taking that was kind of taking a big risk on your part, maybe. I don't know if in retrospect you think that, or if, you know, to, I don't know, in a way introduce your kids to that. Do you think that's a risk, or do you think it's, you know, it comes into this idea of like platforming and stuff as well, whether
Yes.
we should debate people, you know, and you can imagine some parents would be like, you know, I don't want my child introduced to this flat earth nonsense. So just wondering what you thought about that.
No, that's a really, really valid point. I think in this instance, it was the kids that brought it to me, you know, because they'd seen the video, and so they'd obviously seen it. So from my point of view, I was addressing it. Rather than introducing it, they'd been introduced, they'd seen it, and I was addressing it, but addressing it in a way where we could really pick it apart and talk about the science, because we get it from, you know, the horse's mouth, if you like. So yeah, it's not a sense in the way that they'd never heard of flat Earth, and I just turned up and said, "Oh, this guy believes the Earth is flat. What do you think?" It did come from them, but I do, I do totally understand that. I'd certainly never do anything like that with a set of kids who already were engaged, already were motivated, already had high aspirations. You know, this was a bunch of kids who had none of that, really, really disengaged, and it was just trying to search for something outside the box to get them switched on. And that was why. So yeah, fully take that on board. Take that on board. Yeah.
Did it work in the long term?
No.
That's unfortunate.
No, what happened was we watched the video, and they just laughed about how silly the things he was saying was. But then they had no real interest in researching, you know, how Cavendish, for example, determined Big G. It was like, oh, we know he's wrong, that's it. And so no. Sometimes you try and it doesn't work, and I've tried and it didn't work.
Yeah, unfortunate. I'm kind of jumping around a bit here, as always. It's usually a good sign, but I guess this leads into the whole science tutoring, science teaching aspect of it. If you look at like flat Earth, and as well with a lot of the anti-vaccine stuff, do you think that's a failure of the education system, or is there something else to it that's more important than that?
Oh, see, that's a good question. I think when it comes to education about vaccines, etc., you can split it into sort of two branches, can't you? You can split it into the what would we call it in England now, the sort of PSHE citizenship kind of aspect, where you talk about the ethics and the morals of taking drugs and medication and stuff. But on the scientific side of it, when we're actually at school, even up until GCSE high level, all we really learn about vaccines is it's the introduction of some sort of antigen to gain an immune response in the body. We don't go into it very deeply, and then unless you go on to do A-level biology or more, that tends to be your leaving point at school. So when you get people like Andy Kaufman pushing out serious misinformation and start talking about and the whole bundle of it, like things like exosomes or mRNA vaccine. mRNA, the kids know is a genetic material, but they wouldn't understand the role of that in a vaccine. They're introducing terms that are above where a school leaver's from, so it's very easy for them to get a little bit confused, you know. And unless they've got the mindset where they're like, right, actually, I'm gonna actually spend a couple of hours really trying to research what the truth is about it, so I can combat it. Unless they've got that mindset, I can see why they just buy into what people say, because they can be quite articulate with some of the terms they're using, even though they're using them wrong and they're completely wrong. They can still use words that people think, oh, that's quite interesting. So is it a failure of the education system? You could say that, but I think there's very little benefit in teaching kids who are of that age such high level stuff that they're not really going to fully understand. So, you know, science is like you build and you build and you build over years, don't you? And so I don't know, it's a difficult question. That's a good one. I'll say no, it's probably not failure. It's probably more a failure of regulation of social media when it comes to the spreading of misinformation. That's what I'd say.
So, yeah, I guess when I say failure, I don't mean like an absolute, you know, I'm not one of these people who's like, you know, they've done it all wrong. You know, I'm just, you know, is it something that can be addressed? You talked about, you know, like lying it's going to sound like a really stupid sentence, but you talk about like lying with words. But I find there's also that what these people are really good at is lying with numbers, right? It's like one of the ones I saw, you know, one of my family members sharing was about the divergence in a COVID protein. And, you know, they're saying that, oh, it's only this much divergence. How can it be that different? And obviously that's a complete misunderstanding of the biochemistry, right? You change a single amino acid and the whole structure, how that interacts is completely different. You know, I don't know much about, you know, virus interactions, but I am a biochemist, right? I understand that little part, but it's hard to explain that to someone. So just to go back and say, like, you know, when we try and teach that in schools, is there something, or even outside of school, is there something we can do? You know, is this why you try and do this extra stuff outside of, you know?
Well, I think within a school setting, I really think now there is a necessity to include in the curriculum how to spot misinformation. Would that necessarily come under the science curriculum? I don't know, possibly not, possibly more of a citizenship or PSHE. All schools have different names for that kind of stuff. But yeah, you know, just to teach children to be, I mean, I'm going to use the term critical thinker, which is what the conspiracy theorists label themselves as. But if you really are a critical thinker, if you hear somebody say something like that, you know, like you just mentioned then with or whatever, if you hear somebody making these astonishing claims, think critically about what they're saying, compare what they're saying to all the other information that's out there, you know, and weigh up actually who's right and who's wrong here, what are the misconceptions. And I think just having something in the school curriculum that, not just for science, but politics as well, that really makes people proper critical thinkers and not just lazy, I'm just going to listen to what he says and agree with it stuff. I think that would be really important. And I don't think quite there's enough of that.
And how about, I guess the worst offenders of this are often older people. How about outside of school? I mean, maybe this is a completely different subject, but, you know, how do we address that, if you have any ideas?
That's it, because they're so stuck in the ways, aren't they? They're so stuck in the ways, you know. And I think social media has got a lot. It's got to shoulder a lot of the responsibility for what's gone on in terms of dragging people down these rabbit holes. And I know that they're tightening things up now. I know that they're not publicizing and pushing these things as much, but we have got that problem there now, that there are people out there that have this sort of everybody's against us mentality and everything's fake. You can't trust everybody. And how would you tackle that with all people who are set in the ways? I mean, I've spoken to countless people in comment sections, in emails, you know, in debates online, etc. And there's a brick wall there when you try and direct them the right places to look, when you try and explain something, there's just a brick wall of, I am not listening to what you've got to say. And you just know, it doesn't matter how good the information you're presenting them is, it's just, I'm not listening. And I think it's a psychological issue. You know, I don't know, you can reach one or two. But I don't know. It's such a tough question. And I just think social media and the internet have to be very, very careful about how much they're pushing and how much they're allowing on the platforms.
Yeah. So just to bring back to the flat Earth stuff, you kind of mentioned a bit of your motivation in that story earlier, but was there any more to it than that? Was it just to try and reach these people, or was it more for students, or, you know, what was the motivation? You put a lot of time into it. Is there an enjoyment aspect to it as well?
Yeah, my motivations have changed over time. Like I said, my original motivation was just to get the kids engaged with something science-wise, and then there was a little bit after that dealing with Sleeping Warrior. There was a little bit where it was a bit like, screw you, I'm going to get you back. I'll be honest, for the first couple of months, it was like, right. But then after, you know, I started to get to know the community and the characters a little bit more and engage with people more over email and the comment section. That's when it dawned on me, and it took a few months, that these people are genuinely real in their beliefs, and it is ruining their lives. And then my motivations did change to try and deal with them in a slightly different way. I know sometimes I'm still a bit silly and immature on the Conspiracy Catz channel, but I do try, you know, to present as much as I can, sort of information in an easy to understand way, specifically on the Baldy Catz channel, I suppose. So yeah, my motivation very much is now to perhaps not save the people who are already down that rabbit hole because they need people in their own lives to bring them around, but to stop other people going down that route. And if I can do that, either using science on the Baldy Catz channel or by showing up people like Nathan Oakley, who I genuinely believe isn't even a flat earther, he's just in it for the money. You know, if I can show how ridiculous their arguments are in a funny way, you know, hopefully somebody will look at it and go, oh, no, yeah, I was thinking about it, but obviously it's stupid.
Yeah. Do you think this is a case of a few bad actors and a lot of maybe misled people, or do you think the balance is more, you know, 50-50, or, you know, how does that split between people who are actually dishonest and knowing? I guess there's people who are dishonest and knowingly dishonest, and then there's kind of people who are dishonest, but they're also kind of pulling the wool over their own eyes, and you can see that in flat Earth, probably more plain than anywhere else. You know, the arguments just don't. The dissonance there is quite striking.
It really is, isn't it? It really is. And there are a lot that fall into that category. Those that, you know, when I use the term dishonest for, and obviously you don't have to name them, whatever, it's up to you, but people like Phuket Word and Flatzoid or Brian's Logic, etc., you know, their dishonesty comes from the fact that they're too proud to admit that actually they know nothing about geometry or optics or trigonometry or any, you know, they don't know any of those things, or gas pressure, how it works, but yet they claim to be experts, and they don't want to admit that they don't know anything about it, but they do have that belief that they're right. You know, it's like, well, I believe I'm right, but in the back of the mind there will be something, you know, nipping away at them saying, actually, I don't know this, and that is where some dissonance comes in. And I think a lot of people are like that. But then you cast your eyes to, for example, Nathan Oakley, who does it for a living. You know, he's very open about that. This is his job. He's been caught, I don't know if you were of the screenshot where he was caught actually admitting that in the middle of a debate. Have you seen that screenshot?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, well, he was in a debate he was in debate with somebody on his channel, and he accidentally shared his screen and it was captured, and he was basically communicating with one of the other people on the panel behind the scenes saying, oh, we've got to divert the conversation away from this lighthouse we're talking about because it's perfect proof of the globe, and, you know, we don't want to go down there, it's a trap, we need to talk about something else, you know, and that's as much an admission as you can get. So I think he is absolutely 100% dishonest. And then you look at the Globebusters, who they've taken their entire content, they put it behind a paywall now. You know, you cannot access anything that they're going to tell you unless you're paying through the nose for it. And their association with FE Core, you look at all the experiments they've done. I don't know if you're familiar with FE Core, but they've got their own website where they've done lots and lots and lots of different experiments. And yet, even though they've publicized these experiments before they've done them, they've refused to release the data after they've done them, and they're keeping it secret, just like they did with the fiber optic gyroscope that measured the 15-degree per hour drift on the Earth. They kept that secret until after the documentary came out, and the documentary busted it for them anyway. And so, yeah, I think there's a good mix. Sorry, mate, I've waffled there for you, but I think there's a mix.
It's insightful. I think maybe if they knew how hard it was for us to publish stuff, then, you know, maybe they'd be a bit more understanding that, you know, why we want to see their data. But yeah, obviously, as I mentioned at the start, you've kind of achieved what there's a lot of debunkers on YouTube who I could have spoken to, but you've managed to achieve what a lot of them haven't, which is actually change people's minds quite publicly. There's Seek Truth, Speak Truth, and then there's Ranty Flat Earth, or who was known as Ranty Flat Earth. How did you pull that off, and what do you think other people can learn from your technique, I suppose? Or I think it's a bit cynical to call it a technique, maybe.
I don't think it was specific. I think it's just a case of right place, right time. You know, in Seek Truth, Speak Truth's position, he was always somebody that if you engaged politely with him in the comments, he would reply in kind and be polite backwards. You know, a lot of people, you know, you go into Daryl's channel, for example, and you even ask a polite question, you just met with a barrage of abuse because they're not interested in chatting. But he would always come back and be polite, would seek to speak truth. And because of that, a lot of people would go and engage in conversations with him. People like Where's Wally, Ruhif, you know, well, you know, lots and lots of people. So I know, and myself included. But then I made the video that, you know, I know he's credited that was what changed his mind. But at that point, I think he'd taken on so much information from so many people that it was just a case of like the straw that broke the camel's back with him. And I just happened to be the person there. But I don't think he would have listened if we hadn't have had that polite discourse beforehand. You know, I think it was the perfect storm of him being a reasonable, normal guy that would listen to people and have conversation, and then just being the right timing of the video. In terms of Ranty, I mean, we had some battles in the past, some real life. It's hilarious. Well, I don't know if you were that me and Ranty, way before he converted, you were that we ran a podcast together.
I've heard one of your podcasts. I don't know if it's the same one, but the God, what's it called? The name's eluding me now. The paranormal.
Almost Unbelievable.
Almost Unbelievable.
Yes.
That's the one. Yeah, the paranormal one. I listened to a couple of episodes of that a couple of months ago when I was preparing to go on holiday, and I just freaked myself out so much. It's like your logical brain just abandons you when someone's telling you a good ghost story. So.
Well, that I think was more important. Like with Ranty, when we started that podcast, we've been doing it for about 6 months before he stopped being a flat earther. But I always said when I contacted him, I said, "Listen, I want to do this podcast. I don't want to fall out. I don't want to debate you on anything, but I want to get people to come in with stories that we have different opinions on, because he's quite into all the paranormal. He believes that just off the cuff, you know, it's something he's into, and I'm obviously not. And I thought, rather than slamming and trying to debunk the people telling the stories, why don't I just see if I can offer some sort of scientific thing that may explain one part of their story, and then he can believe it, and it's a bit like Mulder and Scully, and off we go." But doing that, I obviously got to talk with him and communicate with him over a long period of time, and he's since said that because he was speaking so much to me, people he'd spoken to beforehand were literally just members of the flat earth community. Like, he would only be speaking to the Nathans, to the Rileys, to whoever. Everybody would be a flat earther. And then it's like when he came out and that and spoke to someone who wasn't, he realized how can I put it, unnormal the flat earth community were, like just how odd they were. And I think, you know, he had said that did start sort of snapping back to reality a bit. But in terms of his conversion, he did it all himself. He come to me and said, "I'm not a flat earther anymore. Here's my proof." That was it. Like, I had nothing to do with it. He'd given his channel away by that point, and he said, "Listen, will you put this out on your channel?" So I did, but I didn't really do anything other than spend some time with him, really.
Yeah. So it's kind of just, it sounds like the main thing is getting people to that point where they don't have the tunnel vision anymore. Most people are smart enough to figure it out for themselves. You just need to get someone to a good place where they are, you know, able to, you know, have that honest conversation with themselves. And, you know, I think what amazes me about a lot of these flat earthers is...
Right. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, I guess, yeah, as I said, these kind of combination of things, you've got a really good piece of evidence, and it's the kind of evidence that you can see with your own eyes. You know, you can't, there's a lot of stuff you can't just claim it's Photoshop or you know, these kind of usual, I mean, you see a lot of people trying to use these usual kind of buzzwords to explain why the perspective, the size of the mountains and the tower, right, all this stuff. But it's amazing to see how that, as I said, coupled with Ranty pushing that, has kind of seemed to send a lot of people into a tailspin. And I was just wondering, as someone who's maybe a bit closer to that, whether you could comment on that, and if there's any, again, if there's any lessons to come out of that whole thing. It's been fascinating to watch from the outside, is what I'm getting at.
It's been crazy. I know. Well, a couple of things about. I know Ranty has had a couple of emails from people that used to subscribe to him when he had his channel, that bought into everything he said, and they've emailed and said, "Listen, look, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. I'm out." You know, which has been excellent. So really pleased he's managed to achieve that. But in terms of like everything like you say, just going into complete meltdown. I think the issue is that and Ranty, as you know, I've had this conversation with Ranty, and he sort of agrees with that, you know, that when he was a flat earther, all he ever watched was flat earth stuff. That's it. That's all he ever watched. He wasn't interested in watching the likes of Simon Dan or myself or anything like that. It was, or Brian Cox or Neil deGrasse Tyson. Not that I'm anywhere near the same league as them, you know, but like, he wasn't interested in watching anything to do with science. He was just interested in watching flat earth stuff. That was it. He wasn't interested in anything else. So when something came out that was considered to be like a flat earth debunk, the only way he would watch it would be through experiencing it through the Flat Earth debate team or other Flat Earth channels and just listening to their explanations. And I think that the thing is, these people put so much faith in your Nathan Oakley's or whatever, that when he comes out and says, oh, this picture doesn't show anything, I've debunked it, don't worry. It's almost like a relief for them. It's like, oh, cool, I might not be able to explain it away, but you know, I trust him and he's debunked it, so it means nothing. And then that's where it stops. It's like a really lazy way of not having to address something. But because Ranty's obviously not taken that spin, these people can't understand why. They're like, well, this picture doesn't mean anything. You must be a liar. You must be a traitor. You know, in a world where you've got shills everywhere, Ranty's just another shill now. You know, and I think it's like a default position they take, isn't it?
Yeah, so easy to explain away. I think it's a bit more, you know, as you know, I think with the case of Seek Truth, Speak Truth. Am I getting that the right way around? Hopefully.
Seek Truth. I always get it wrong.
But that, you know, that was maybe someone who was in it for a bit short of a time. But as far as I know, Ranty was in it for like 5 years or something crazy like that. So pretty much. Yeah. At least to my knowledge, like that was even before it was starting to get popular. I think I mentioned to you before, I'm kind of interested in just chronicling the rise and what I think is potentially the fall of flat Earth. That kind of started to really pick up steam in like 2015-ish. So if it is 5 years, and that puts him pretty much smack bang, you know, during that first wave of flat earthers.
Yeah, he was right at the very beginning. I remember he told me, and he said this on his videos, he wouldn't mind me saying this, but he told me that he just was the type of person who loved conspiracies and was quite, would buy into stuff, you know, because he finds them quite fascinating, you know, and he was already a moon landing denier. He was already into the chemtrail stuff. And when Flat Earth came along, you know, he said for the first week or two, he thought it must be rubbish. But then, you know, just that side of his personality took over and he had to go out and take photographs. And of course, he didn't see what he expected to see. And that was it. He was sold that quickly. Sorry, I forgot exactly what your question was there. Oh, yeah, with the rise and fall of it. But I think from his point of view, and also from what I get from him for other flat earthers as well, they're so very narrow-minded in the field of what they would call research, that taking one photograph and thinking, oh, should I actually be able to see that much of the mountain hidden because I can only see, you know, this much of the mountain hidden, therefore it doesn't add up, therefore the earth must be flat. You know, it seems to be very, very narrow. It's not a case of, well, you know, let's look at seismology, meteorology, astronomy. Let's look at, you know, they take one small snapshot that they're interested in and everything else just gets completely and utterly ignored. And, you know, they become so very obsessive about the one little, let's take these photographs. And I forgot what the original question was now, mate. Sorry, I've just waffled.
Well, I don't, to be fair, I don't think I asked. I was just...
Oh, did you? I just went off on one.
letting you in. You look like you had something to say. But yeah, no, I was... I guess where I was going is what I think, from my experience with misinformation, is the best way for it to perpetuate is to keep constantly changing the subject, because once something's debunked, you know, I think the golden time for it is when you Google it and there's no answers. Because, and I say this to someone as you know, I'm quite conspiratorially minded as well. You know, whenever I hear a new thing, I'm like, oh, but what if it is true? So I always have to go and like, you know, I'm ready to accept the conspiracy theory, you know, when it comes. So I always have to go check, you know, and usually it's not always easy, particularly if it's something new. And I think that's what I'm wondering with Flat Earth being a much bigger thing. You know, it's not just like one piece, it's a whole body of misinformation. that might just have taken a lot longer. And I wonder if 5 years is maybe coming towards the end of that life cycle. Surely everything that has been said can be said, and all of that has been debunked by this point. I don't know. Maybe they can keep inventing stuff forever. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, it's definitely the tactic that the flat Earth debate team take. When I was on the scene, the big thing at the time was perspective in the Earth curve calculator. Like, I mean, I don't know why they think those two things would marry up, but it was that was the one thing they'd hold on to until it had been done to death, and then it moved to, you know, atmospheric pressure and what we are back on now, the diffraction limit now, and you know, they are just milking a topic to absolute death, and then, you know, it is just debunked and debunked, and then they move on to another one. But you've got to remember that the people who come into it are coming into it with new eyes, that those that are likely to become flat earthers, they haven't really got the mindset to do anything other than just listen to the flat earth channels. And, you know, they're not necessarily the type of people that are going to go back and do all that research and look at all the videos that have been out there debunking it, because if they were, they wouldn't end up becoming a flat earther, you know. I certainly think it's a psychological issue. But yeah, I think the other part of it. So go on.
No, I'll let you finish first.
Well, I was going to say, another part of it I'm not touched on is religion. I know for a fact that people like Bob Nadell from Globebusters, obviously Mr. Thrive and Survive. You've got Nathan Oakley as well, though he doesn't admit it these days, but there's plenty of video evidence of him in the past. Quantum Erasers, certainly, they come from Nathan Thompson. They come from it from a biblical perspective. They come from it from, you know, they perceive the Bible to be saying that the earth must be flat. And I think ultimately, if you believe that there's a higher power out there, and you are so fixed on what they say word for word, then even if you can't make sense of the observations, it doesn't matter, because, you know, there's a higher power up there he's doing something, we just can't understand it, you know. And I think for a lot of them that approach it from a religious point of view, it doesn't really matter how many times you debunk and explain, because yeah, okay, what we're saying might make sense, but there's something else going on that this higher power is created, and that's, you know, none of us will ever understand that. And I think that's where it comes from for a lot of them.
Yeah. So I really don't like this wording myself, but some people have related flat Earth to like a cult-like mentality. Given, like you said, that kind of, it narrows your social group, and you rely on very kind of powerful individuals to dictate down what the dogma is. What do you think about that? Is it fair to call it a cult or a cult-like thought system?
Yeah, I think it's definitely cult-like. You know, I certainly don't think that people like, you know, Dell or Nathan or Quantum Erasers or whatever, I don't think they consider themselves to be cult leaders or go out with any kind of intention to create a cult. I don't think there's any deliberate action behind it. But yet, when you go onto the platforms, you know, you do find that you are not welcome unless you have the same opinion. You are banned, you are chastised, you are gotten rid of. You do find that the people that are supporting them are constantly repeating almost word for word the same quotes and mantra that those flat earth channels are mentioning themselves, and yet they don't understand it. You know, they don't, when you question them, why have you said that, what does it mean? Again, it's just abuse. You know, it seems to be a very, very closed shop. I think it is extremely cult-like. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So yeah, just to change the subject a little bit, onto something that is particularly interesting to me, is that you had the opportunity to debate Kent Hovind, who is, I don't know, possibly the most famous person you've debated, I imagine, pretty well known in the US as a creationist.
He is.
How I mean, I know how it went, but in your own words, how was that experience? Did you feel let down, or were you not surprised at all?
No, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. He was a nice guy off camera. He was a nice guy. And we'd said before we even started, you know, we were on a Marvel Girls channel, and it's very much like, you must be respectful. And we agreed, no, we're going to be respectful, but it's going to be competitive. I'm coming for you. You know, we're going to be. So we knew, and he was the same. You know, so he was polite, he was respectful. We got on really well off camera, but it was like, when the debate's on, it's a competition. You know, and I don't. How can I put it? The way it went was exactly how I expected it to go, because, like I said a minute ago, he's got this obvious faith that the Bible says that the earth is 6,000 years old, and it doesn't matter, you know, what science gets put his way, because God has done something to explain that away, even though we don't know what it is. What did shock me, though, was his complete and utter lack of understanding of what evolution was. Like, he's done these debates for what, 30, 40 years? And to not even know the entry-level basics of what evolution is, that surprised me.
Yeah. You kind of expect someone who made a living out of taking it apart, that you at least understand it. You know, that would make you be better at your job, for sure. You know, even if you were out to take it down.
Well, that's it. How can you be an authority on something if you don't? I mean, I don't know if you caught a bit where I asked him what allele frequency was, which, you know, is something we teach 15-year-olds in the UK. Still chuckle at that now. You know, he just didn't have a clue, did he? Bless him. But no, I quite liked him. He was a nice guy, and maybe I'm hypocritical, and I probably am. Right, I probably am being quite hypocritical, but I don't. For some reason, I don't hold sort of like people who are young Earth creationists in the same view that hold flat Earth. I just don't see it being as damaging, and I don't know why. Maybe I'm a hypocrite. I just don't see it as being as bad a thing as flat Earth.
So why do you think flat Earth is particularly damaging? You know, you could focus a lot. I mean, and you do on occasion focus on like vaccines, or, you know, things that are maybe perhaps to people who aren't familiar with flat Earth maybe more important. Why do you think flat Earth is worthy of a lot of your time?
Well, I think the thing with flat Earth, and this has grown as I've communicated with them more, is that if you are a flat earther, for a lot of them, your life consists of thinking that all the teachers around you are liars, the astronomers are liars, meteorologists are liars, all scientists are liars. The governments must have been on this conspiracy. All the governments of the world must have been on this for centuries in the making. You can't trust anybody. You can't trust your teachers, your doctors. Everybody around you is hiding something from you. And the damaging aspect of that to your mental health, and the way that it takes over your life, Ranty and Seek Truth, Speak Truth have been quite open about how it just destroyed their lives, you know, just absolutely destroyed it. Ranty talked about getting so obsessed with it all that, you know, he couldn't get a mortgage because he'd not been working enough and been doing lots of observations. Seek Truth, Speak Truth have spoken about how it just ruined his relationship with his I think, fiance at the time, and he just lost her. Although he's back with her now, which is good. And I think when you're in that position, you know, how can you lead a normal life and function? And if you have got any kind of susceptibility to some sort of mental illness, some sort of paranoia, it's only going to make it far, far worse. So I think it destroys your life if you go down that rabbit hole. Whereas if you look at young Earth creationism, and I might be wrong, like, you know, I might be totally wrong with this, but from where I'm stood, I think a young Earth creationist is someone who's got faith in God. You know, they're think that the earth was only a few thousand years old, to them is a beauty of, you know, God's creation. And I don't think they necessarily walk around feeling paranoid. I just think they walk around thinking, you know, people that do archaeology and stuff are just mistaken. We don't know why. God's done something, but they're mistaken. We love them too, you know, and I just don't think it's as damaging.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense now that you put it that way. So I wonder what you think. One of the arguments that I read that kind of interest in flat Earth, it's not gone away, it's just gone down over, particularly recently, since the COVID outbreak. One of the arguments was that, you know, if you buy into flat Earth, you've kind of got to buy into a lot of the other conspiracy theories as well. And when that became real, what the effects of that were with COVID, that maybe was the shock to enough people to get them out of it. Do you think is that oversimplifying things, or is there some truth to that idea?
You mean to get people out of flat Earth?
Yeah, they're kind of like the I can't remember. I think it was on a Big Think or one of those websites where they had this prediction, that COVID was gonna wake up a lot of people in flat Earth because you can't believe in flat Earth and then think that the government is going to be doing a good thing by vaccinating you. You kind of have to buy into every Illuminati-esque conspiracy theory because they're hiding everything, right? So suddenly then you realize that like, oh, a vaccine is helping or lockdowns are helping, or COVID made it inescapable, and I know that caused a lot of people to double down, but perhaps also maybe it gave people the shake that they needed to reevaluate. And maybe not. I just wonder your perspective on that.
No, I think you've explained that really well. Yeah, I mean, you're right. There are a lot of people who have doubled down, but you're right. It does. There were people out there who've experienced COVID for themselves, who've had family members who suffer from it. Sadly, there'll be people out there who have family members who've died from it. And although there are some people who would still say they never died from COVID, and like say they double down, there will be people out there that have realised that hang on, this is real, and maybe make them question other things. But then they'll always invent something else,
So yeah, I guess finally, just I thought I'd go over a couple of the big hits in the kind of last 5 years of flat Earth stuff, more like mainstream stories. But I just wondered if you could give a couple of sentences of your thoughts on each of them. So the first one is Neil deGrasse Tyson versus Bob.
Versus Bob Nadell.
Versus the hip hop artist B.O.B.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know if you saw that.
Sorry, when people say Bob, I'm thinking Bob Nadell. I thought I missed that one. Yeah. Yeah, that was. I mean, oh my god. I mean, hasn't B.O.B. come out after that and sort of retracted his claim there? Maybe.
Oh, I should go double check.
Or is he still? Is he still doubling down? I'm not sure. But that to me was, I mean, in a way, when you got someone who's high profile like he was coming out and saying that the Earth must be flat, I think someone who's influential and has a lot of people who follow them, then I think okay, fair enough, Neil deGrasse Tyson, well done for coming out and actually addressing it. Whether he addressed it in a way that was more scientific or entertaining, I'm not really sure. I know obviously did the whole microphone drop, etc. I'm not really too familiar with how he addressed it, but I am glad he did come out and at least address it. But yeah, it's not something I'm massively familiar with, that story.
It was a long time ago. I only remembered it because I've been researching some of these news stories lately. The other one is the Beyond the Curve experiments.
From the documentary?
Yes, that's right. So the 15 degrees an hour, is it, drift? And also the light source experiment.
Yeah. Well, I've spoken a couple of times. I've been lucky enough to be on either podcasts or panels of a show where the makers of the Behind the Curve documentary were actually there.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, their insights were absolutely fantastic. One thing I got from them was almost like, not a guilt, but almost like a pity for the people. They'd obviously got quite attached to some of the people, Mark and Bob and Jerry and whatever.
You can
I think they actually, they found them really, nice and pleasant people to be around. But then the backlash that they've got, they were absolutely shocked when they were shown the vitriol that Bob Nadell got after the 15 degree per hour drift. I mean, it was played on a show and it was kind of like, oh God, look how silly he is, look how everyone's reacting. And, they actually, they went pretty quiet, and I think they were really upset about that. They didn't want that personal sort of abuse to be attributed to them. But on the other hand, Bob Nadell has got a history, like we said before with FE Court, of doing experiments, not getting the results he wants, and then silencing those results. There is another example, and I know you only said you wanted a quick sentence, but there's another example that Ranty told me, and he's mentioned this on a stream, that while they were part of FE Core, they paid somebody to construct a super like precise, it's a massive gyroscope thing, absolutely huge, and one that would be able to overcome the have little enough friction to show a 15 degree per hour drift, or to show whatever drift you'd want at that latitude. And they paid this guy money to do it. He built it, he tested it, he got exactly the drift that you would expect on the Earth. And then he was threatened by FE Corps that they would sue him if he released the results. And you know, he's been challenged on that a number of times as Bob, and he just won't comment on it. He won't deny it, he just won't comment on it. So yeah, I feel sorry for him, but I think at the end of the day, you can't get results over and over and over and over again and then pretend those results don't exist and expect to be taken seriously.
Yeah. I mean, I think some people in that documentary were more sympathetic than others, shall we say. But I think that was, you know, I think it's why it was such a good documentary. They could have gone in and been mean-spirited and you know, look how dumb these people are. But, you know, I think they really tried to capture that human aspect. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying before, you know, it's that connection with people outside that I sometimes when I see other debunking things, you know, there's a difference between a kind of friendly ribbing and, you know, just shutting it down by being overly cruel.
Yeah.
I think what you've shown is that the best way to win people over is to, you know, have open a good relationship with them, whether you disagree with them or not. And so I think, you know, part of the cool thing about that documentary was how they handled that, because they could have easily gone the easy way of just poking fun.
Yeah.
And it was quite a human thing.
It was good. It was good. They handled it lovely, didn't they? I thought it was, yeah, really good documentary.
Yeah, so the final one was that I don't know if you've seen, but I'm not so familiar with Logan Paul, but his big news story was the Flat Earth documentary that he released when he claimed that he was a flat earther for a short amount of time.
Did you see he went to the Flat Earth conference, didn't he?
Yeah, I watched
on
it.
stage
I haven't seen any of his other videos, but I really thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it a lot.
Robbie Davison, the guy who organised that conference afterwards, he did a stream with Patricia Steer, who's since obviously withdrawn herself from the community, and he went on with her just to apologise for all the damage that he'd done to Flat Earth by getting Logan Paul on. And I mean, you know, it is trolling, and I think you could see it coming a mile off. I know Mark Sargent did. Mark Sargent refused to be part of the conference if they were going to let Logan Paul on, because he just saw it coming a mile off. But you know, everybody else was just like, yes, we've got a high-figure person that's going to, you know, support our cause. Yeah, I think it was very funny. I mean, what can I say? It was very funny. Yeah, it was a good bit of entertainment.
Speaking of entertainment, I hope you enjoyed that. I've been speaking to a lot of interesting people lately, so if you want to see more of that kind of stuff, let me know and I'll share those as well. Maybe even like and subscribe. Have a great day.